There are a whole bunch of players now available who can help you win a World Series. Unfortunately, they can help you win the 2023 World Series.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Thanks so much for helping make Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days, on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully with Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And the best way to get a hold of us right here on the YouTube page. And today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, and you can use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You get $20 off of your purchase. On today's show, we're going to be talking about how there are some key members of a relatively recent World Series champion who are now available for all to get. And I don't necessarily disagree with the moves in terms of their front office, but it's also a big, huge opportunity, I think, for some quality bargain hunting, especially for some of those teams that, quite frankly, have to just put major leaguers on their roster. Also, we're going to be talking about the fact that recycling. Baseball is going to try to recycle a magical moment that is really hard to recycle because it was so fresh when it happened, and it's about to become pretty stale. I have two ideas of how to fix the Field of Dreams game. One is to put a different team playing in there, and the other is to stop doing it. But before we go to that, let's go to the trivia question. Trivia question I had the other day was, and it's a pretty simple one. Who was the first player to earn $3 million a season? $3 million, well, that gets you probably a backup catcher these days. But in the late 1980s, especially in the wake of the the collusion that was going on between the owners and the players. So basically, the owners were colluding to drive down free agent prices. And as it happened, it caused what I think is one of the truly underappreciated scandals in baseball history. After they were found guilty of collusion, there was an explosion in free agent salaries. Now, Ken Mitchell, H5I, thanks for the continuous amazing episodes. Oh, look at that, self-serving to put that one on there. For the trivia question, the first name to pop in my mind is Bobby Bonilla. Bobby Bonilla did very famously get a big, huge honking contract, and one that the Mets get a lot of crap for because they still paying him the deferred money. It was a smart move for the Mets to give him that deferred money. That allowed them to get him off the books and also to acquire players like Mike Piazza, who helped them win the pennant in 2000. So don't give the Mets crap. That was actually a smart move that they made, but that's not the answer. The guest, Andy Bloomberg, said Ricky Henderson. Terrific guess. Terrific guess. Wrong, but a terrific guess. Chris Smith, 003QX, said Jose Canseco. Another fantastic guess. Fabulously incorrect. It was GRT Hughes, who's an everyday Sully, who said Kirby Puckett. That's right. Future Hall of Famer and the star of 2 World Series champions in Minnesota. The late Kirby Puckett was the first player to earn $3 million a year. Well, a couple of players will probably earn $3 million a year, but they won't be at the top of the earnings leaders in Major League Baseball. Look, this was the deadline for took place the other day for teams to tender a contract for arbitration eligible players. And if they non-tender, if they do not offer contracts to someone, and they may be making this decision based on financial reasons or moves or just not enough room on the roster, they will non-tender a player. They won't tender them a contract, making them a free agent and making them a more attractive free agent in some ways for some teams that cling to their first-round draft picks like a koala hanging onto a tree. These are players who won't have a first-round pick attached to them. Now, the announcement the other day showed that Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim were among the players that the Rangers non-tendered. And another player who was non-tendered from that deal from the Texas Rangers was Josh Sborz. And I find this to be very interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you take a look at what those players did just 2 years ago, 2 flipping years ago, they were on the floats, they were on the big parade going through Dallas, Texas, and Jonah Heim with his 18 home runs, and Adolis Garcia, who put up big numbers that postseason, and Josh Sborz, who did what the Rangers couldn't do in 2011 when they were twice one strike away from winning the World Series in the same game. Josh Sborz got the final out. They are all now non-tendered free agents, and they are out there for all to see. Now, it makes sense on a lot of levels. Sborz was I don't even think Sborz pitched for the Rangers this year. I think he was injured and wasn't on the major league roster if my memory serves correctly. Adolis Garcia had a very disappointing season for a Ranger team that really should have been a big contender, and they weren't. Jonah Heim did not have a good year. I mean, his OPS plus was 77, which means by definition, he was a subpar player. He had a little bit of pop, but offered nothing. An OPS of 602 is not great. For Adolis Garcia, who's now on the wrong side of 30, still had some pop. He hit 19 home runs, but he was not a threat anymore. And this is a big, huge problem for Schumacher, the new manager of the Texas Rangers. This was a Ranger team that had sky-high expectations. And when you take a look at how they performed, DeGrom pitched well. Eovaldi was an all-star. And Tyler Mahle and Jack Leiter, and for the most part, Patrick Corbin, they all did well. The pitching in Texas was actually quite good, thank you very much. It was the bats that didn't come through. And even with that, Texas was flirting with a wild card spot for a big chunk of the year. And there was a period of time they actually, a little period of time in the summer, they actually had a summer score. They actually got themselves into contention, but they fell to a flat 81-81 record. And as a baseball fan who has followed, baseball all throughout the 80s and 90s and 2000s, where the Texas Rangers were always putting up some of the most incredible offensive numbers, had phenomenal lineups all throughout my life, quite frankly. And to see them not make the playoffs because their bats were bad. All those teams I watched, whether it was the whether it was the teams that had Richie Zisk when I was much younger, or those fabulous teams they had in the 80s where they had Julio Franco and Pete Incaviglia, and they had eventually and Ruben Sierra, and then later Juan Gonzalez and Palmeiro and Rusty Greer, and then the great teams they had led by Josh Hamilton and Adrian Beltre, all those tremendous lineups they've had over the years. Pudge Rodriguez and all of them, but they always had pitching that withered in the Texas heat. Now they've got the pitching. And they're saying, you know what, we're going to say goodbye to some of our postseason heroes because, quite frankly, they're not doing the job. Now, whether or not they're going to fill those spots with other big major leaguers or they're going to be in a full overhaul, which is one of the reasons why maybe Bruce Bochy left for that reason, I don't know, and neither do you. But there are a few elements to some of these players coming into the non-tender world that, quite frankly, I find interesting. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play for your game with FanDuel. It's the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Now, there are some real reasons to take a good long look at these players who have been non-tendered. Now, and especially Jonah Heim and Garcia, because 2023 wasn't that long ago. 2023, by my calculations, was just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, these players were the key parts of winning the first title in the history of the Texas Rangers. And now here they are, floating around, completely available for all to have. The ALCS MVP, Adolis Garcia, who had just a phenomenal, he drove in 15 GD runs against the Houston Astros in that very strange series, that very strange ALCS, and got a key home run in the first game of the World Series. He was injured for the final bunch of games. At that point, he had put his stake in the ground. He was phenomenal against Baltimore. He was the MVP of the series against the Astros, and he had an OPS of 1.10 in that year's World Series in limited play. And he is just a couple years removed from being being an all-star, two-time all-star. Now, am I saying he's going to be a two-time all-star again? No, I don't. But sometimes you may want to catch a player on a rebound. Sometimes you may want to give someone an opportunity to say, hey, do you want to prove yourself? You want to prove that you're worthy? You want to prove that you're still a big league player? Well, come jump aboard and see if you can do something right now. Same thing with Jonah Heim for teams that need a big league catcher. This is something, if you are a team that needs a big league catcher, guess what? One is now currently available, and not for a gigantic price. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes, look, it's annoying when you're a team like the Yankees or the Mets, and you start doing things like, going bargain hunting when you could be out there. But, some teams don't want to go out and sign a big, huge, honking, expensive player when they can get more or less the same production and not have to give up a massive multi-year contract and not have to give up a first-round draft pick along the way. Now, if you take a good long look, there's sometimes you can get decent players who have been non-tendered. I mean, you take a look at, Ramon Laureano is an example of a player who became pretty productive last year, who had been non-tendered. You could go out, I'm not saying it happens all the time. I'm not even saying it's a commonplace thing. But the idea of someone going from an all-star hero in the postseason to being a completely worthless player, this is when I take a good long look at teams like the Pirates and the Miami Marlins. The reason I'm bringing those two out, and taking them to the woodshed right away, is the fact that those are two teams that should be trying to put a contender on the field. Those are two teams. The Marlins had a very good run to the end of the season last year. They did. And they played well down the stretch. And they are very close to being a contending team. They inched close to 500 along the way. They didn't get there, but if you put a few more major leaguers on this team, a team that has a good pitching staff, that's not too shabby. And maybe bringing in Adolis Garcia to say, hey, we're not asking you to do what you did before. Just be a serviceable major leaguer. And the same thing with the Pirates, something that I had preached long and hard all last year. They have a Cy Young winner. They have a legit ace. They have a decent pitching staff. They have a grotesquely terrible offense. How much worse can Adolis Garcia be? Give him a shot. And maybe tell him, hey, this is your chance to get a big long-term contract or something like that. Play a 1-year deal with us. Show us you can really do it. Or take a chance on a 2 or 3. I don't know. But the Pirates need to get some major leaguers on that team, as do the Miami Marlins, as do the West Sacramento A's. I think I'm going to call them that for the rest of the season, the West Sacramento A's, because they technically play in West Sacramento. That's where they play. That's where the stadium is. And they have right now, they said goodbye to J.J. Bleday. But they had the 2 best rookies in the American League last year and had a better record than I think than you probably thought they had. And if the Rangers are indeed in a rebuild mode, then basically you're talking about a division where you don't know what the Angels are going to do. The Angels are a proverbial mess right now. If the Rangers are in a rebuild mode, and if the Astros take a step back, then the A's do have a potential shot of sniffing a wild card in the American League. And a big way to do that is put major leaguers on the roster. Last year, and I got this from MLB.com, last year you had Griffin Canning, Kyle Finnegan, Mike Tauchman, Gavin Sheets, Austin Hayes, and the aforementioned Ramon Laureano, who all did okay. Some did better than okay. And they were non-tender the year before. And if you take a look at some of those players, you can get them for virtually nothing, for a small contract. Maybe what Kirby Puckett made. And if you want to get someone who has a chip on their shoulder, like Sborz, like Heim, like Garcia. By the way, another Nathaniel Lowe was the first baseman on that team. He was non-tender by the Red Sox. You could essentially get the band back together from the 2023 World Series title. But I want to start seeing some of these teams who have talent, who are creeping towards that relevancy, to get on with it. Grab some major leaguers. Put major leaguers around the roster and see what you got. You have a player like Garcia, who is a star in the World Series, shown in the postseason, has been there, has done that, and happened to have 2 subpar years. Dust him off, give him a new lease on life, a new reason to go out there and do something, and maybe pitch the idea of living in Miami as being a positive thing, or being in the legacy of Roberto Clemente in Pittsburgh. Or, and bear with me on this one, have the joy, the honor, hell, the dignity to represent the good people of West Sacramento as you play in a minor league ballpark. Good God, what are they even doing there? What are we even doing? What are we doing there? But I do believe that you could get something for some of those players. You may not get the superstar year, but you could get a mad, I want to prove to the world that the Rangers were wrong for getting rid of me type of season. And if a franchise that desperately needs to have some sense of relevancy can pull that off, do you know what? You can do a lot worse. The NFL season is back, and there's nothing better than being in a stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between the long lines, the login screens, and the price jumping at checkout. You know what? It's really frustrating. That's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. All fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. You know what? I use Game Time when I got my tickets to go to the National League Championship Series. And I'm telling you, you are going to get great deals. It's so easy. And you get to see your view from the seat. They have the part where you click on the seat, you can see exactly what you're going to see from the ball. And it's so easy to use. I love the zone deals because I know where I like to sit in a ballpark. And I say, this is the section I want to sit in. So get me the best deal right in there. Boom, they'll take it off. And if you're an NFL fan, you can get some of your games for as little as $100. It's telling you, it's so fast, it's so cheap, and it's less stressful than any other way I've ever bought my tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. Download the Game Time app today. There's a new tradition that's starting to brew in baseball. Oh, and by the way, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. And thanks so much for making us the number one sports podcasting network. It's really great. And I love the fact that some of you are starting to discover us. And if you're new and floating down the river Sully with me, you are always welcome here. Baseball is starting to do some things that I really like in terms of having some unusual games during the year. I don't like starting the season overseas, but I love the idea of, playing unusual games, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in Korea, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in London. I think that's cool. I just don't want to start the season that way. And they've done things like the game that was played in Alabama to honor Willie Mays. You had the game at the racetrack this year, which was a bit of a fiasco, but it was a great idea. And a lot of this started with the Field of Dreams game a few years ago. Now, the Field of Dreams game, when they first did it, was really great. You had the White Sox playing in that game, and the White Sox were the team of the players who came out of the cornfield in the film. And they played the Yankees, the biggest draw, and it was a great experience seeing it. Kevin Costner doing the walk on the field and the players coming out of the cornfield was really cool and brought back the memories of a film that I happen to really love. I know not everyone is a big fan, but what are you going to do? And the game itself was tremendous. I mean, that's what added to it. The game itself was an absolute thriller, ending with a walk-off home run by Tim Anderson into the cornfield. You couldn't ask for a better one, because at the time, the Yankees were a very good team. They were a playoff team. And the Chicago White Sox were a very good team. They were a playoff team. So it all worked out well the first time they did it. And then they did it again, and in 2022, and it kind of felt stale. It wasn't the cool sort of original type of project that they did then. And now they're coming back to doing it. And boy, it feels like they are just trying to revive a dead horse there. They're having the Minnesota Twins play the Phillies in that game. And what are the Phillies' connection to Field of Dreams? What are the Twins' connection to Field of Dreams? At least if you had the Giants played there, Moonlight Graham played for the Giants. It just feels like they're trying to recreate something that isn't working. That it worked. It worked great initially. Why are they trying to restart that? Now, the change I would personally make to the Field of Dreams game is this: have Toronto play there. Absolutely have Toronto play there. Why, Sully? Why have Toronto play there? Other than the fact that the Blue Jays are, the defending American League champion and just so close to being the World Series champion last year. If they signed Bo Bichette, and just bear with me for a second, if they signed Bo Bichette, then they absolutely have to have the Blue Jays do it. Why? Because you would have Vladdy Guerrero Jr., you'd have Dalton Varsho, you'd have Bo Bichette all on that team. What was Field of Dreams? Why was it such a big, huge success? Was it a big, huge success because of the baseball choreography? Was it a big, huge success because Kevin Costner was in it? No. Kevin Costner has been in films, even in that era, that didn't make any business. And there are a lot of films about baseball. That film became a massive success because of all the fathers and sons who saw the film, all the daughters and all the people thinking about their parent who took them to the ball game. That's what made it a success. It's a fantasy film about a son reconnecting with his father, his estranged father. He reconnects him through his heroes. The hero of his father's hero was Shoeless Joe, And the author who came between him and his father was Terrence Mann. So he brings both of them there. I hope I'm not spoiling the film. And it's about a father and a son who were very stubborn and fought. And the father died before apologies could be made. And it was all about reconnecting with the father. And everyone, I saw it with my dad. And we were both bawling. And it's brought together so many fathers, sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, son, whatever combination of parent and child. And to have that where you also have on the field the sons of major leaguers. You have, Don Bichette's son, Bo Bichette. You have Gary Varsho's son, Dalton Varsho. And of course, you have Hall of Famer Vladimir Guerrero looking at his son on the field. You have all the fathers out there, including the 3 Blue Jay fathers out there watching him. How do you not see this as a possibility? But here's the other one. I have mentioned this before, but I do think they should do this because I think it's the smart thing to do. I think it would be if we were going to have an interesting game with some connection to baseball history and a region that you can play, it will involve playing in a minor league ballpark, but you got to bear with me. I can't believe this hasn't happened yet. But there has to be a game between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Mets. Now, those are 2 tremendous draws. And I know that unlike a Twins versus Phillies game, it may not be the biggest draw in Major League Baseball. The Mets and Dodgers is one of the biggest draws in Major League Baseball, but bear with me for a second. When the Dodgers come to New York to play the Mets, at one point, they have to play a game at the ballpark on the boardwalk, the home of the Brooklyn Cyclones. You have to have a game where the Dodgers return to Brooklyn to play a major league game. The Giants return to the Polo Grounds, the home of the Giants for all those years, and then they moved to San Francisco. They returned to the Polo Grounds because the first few years the Mets played, they played in the Polo Grounds. So there's no urgency to have the Mets return to the Polo Grounds there. The A's have returned to Philadelphia in what's it called? In interleague play. The Braves have returned to Milwaukee. They played them in the postseason. The Braves have also returned several times to Boston. The Dodgers have never returned to Brooklyn. The Dodgers have never played a game that counts in Brooklyn since leaving Brooklyn after the 1957 season, just 2 years removed from their lone championship in Brooklyn. Got to do it. Got to do it while there's still a few Brooklyn Dodgers alive. By the way, Sandy Koufax is from Brooklyn and became the most beloved Los Angeles Dodger of all time, or at least the most famous one. I digress. Why hasn't that happened? Tell me that you couldn't ratchet up the nostalgia meter to 11. You have one day where you see the Cyclone roller coaster and all of Coney Island, and getting a Nathan's dog and all that stuff in Brooklyn. For at least one day, the Dodgers return. And they play the Mets. And there may be a few old timers there left who remember when Ebbets Field was the epicenter of the borough. You got to do that. Why wouldn't that happen? I need someone to explain that to me, and explain to me in little words. Instead of recycling the Field of Dreams game, which, by the way, is not playing in a massive 40,000 seat stadium, that's playing in essentially the ballpark that Ray Kinsella built. One game, the Dodgers return to Brooklyn. I think it's got to happen. And thanks so much again for making Locked On MLB your first listen. And thanks so much for making us the #1 sports podcasting network. And let's go to the trivia question. It is Texas Ranger related. Who is the first All-Star in Texas Rangers history? Put your answers down below here on the YouTube. Talking about the heroes of the World Series just 2 years ago are available for some of those teams that just need major leaguers. The Field of Dreams game getting a little stale. Let's freshen it up with a Nathan's Hot Dog on Coney Island. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.